Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. Good to see you guys. Thursday morning. Um, so we're gonna do challenges that commercial farmers face today. Yesterday we had an important lesson on Von Thun, and we'll review that with a throwback. Um, so warm up questions. Which of the following does not have a well-known relic boundary? Now, back when we were learning about political geography, we learned about different types of boundaries: geometric, topographic or geological, antecedent, superimposed. Relic boundary is a boundary that used to be there but is no longer there. Like a relic is like an old thing. Um, Sorry, let me try to zoom in a little bit. That doesn't work. That might be a little better. All right. So, an old boundary that's no longer there. The answer: Vietnam, UK, Germany, China, Bolivia. The answer is Germany. The relic boundary there is the Berlin Wall. So really famous for dividing capitalism and communism during the Cold War. No longer there, no longer matters. All right, second one should be a little bit easier, which is not a centripetal force. Remember, centripetal forces pull things together. Um, Confidence in the central government, that pulls people together. National transportation systems, that unites countries. Anthems and flags are symbols that unite people. Separatist groups clearly do not unite people. They are the opposite. They want to separate their country, usually break away to create their own country. All right, throwback. Von Thunen's model for agricultural land use. So, what was the model used for? Basically, Von Thunen was trying to tell farmers the best place to plant the best crops. All right. Now, how did he determine this, or what variables did he think about? He thought about how far away are you to the market or the city? How much does it cost to transport goods? And are your products perishable? All right. Do they last long or not very long? Those are all things that he cared about. And the fourth thing would be the price of the land. All right. And so, how is the model designed? Well, it looks like a dartboard or a bullseye. In the middle is the city. Sometimes I use the word market, it means the same thing. Right outside the city, dairy, fruits, and vegetables, because those things cost a lot to transport and they're very perishable. They'll go bad quickly. Outer ring, or next ring out, is a forest. Remember, Von Thunen wrote this in 1826 when people were still building stuff out of wood. Wood is very heavy. It costs a lot to transport, so he wanted it near the city. We have grains and other crops in the next ring. These are things that are relatively cheap to transport. They're not perishable. You can stack them on top of each other so they can be far away from the city. Last one is ranching. You need lots of land for those happy cows to walk around. All right. Farther away from the city, the cheaper the land is. And then when the cows were ready for slaughter, they would literally take the cows in alive to the city, and the slaughterhouses were in the city because that meat is perishable. I know this is kind of complicated, so shoot me an email or a comment on Google Classroom, and I'll get back to you. Today we're going to look at challenges for commercial farmers. This, I don't know, this might be a little weird. I'm going to go back into that topic of subsidy that I don't do a great job of teaching, but I'll do my best here. Again, reach out with questions. So we know commercial farmers are those that grow food for surplus. They sell their surplus to make a profit. Now, it might seem counterintuitive, but one of the problems, one of the challenges is overproduction. This is the price of soybeans in the United States, the second most common crop after corn. You can see how volatile it is. It goes up and down, up and down, up and down. All right. That's not great for planning. This year you think, oh, everything's great. I'm making so much money. Next year you're not making anything. And the issue is the more crops they grow, the more supply you have, the cheaper it becomes. So they're almost like a victim of their own success. All right. And we keep growing more and more crops because we use these chemicals of the Green Revolution. So what do we do? How do you counteract that problem? Well, the US government actually encourages farmers not to plant food. Farmers will actually get money sometimes to leave their fields fallow. If you recall, fallow means when you don't grow crops in your field. It's good because it helps replenish the soil, but it also prevents the problems of overproduction for farmers. All right. But then on top of this, we've got this idea of subsidies again, where the government will simply pay farmers. All right. And oftentimes the subsidy depends on how big the farm is. So the bigger the farm, the greater the subsidy or the payment you get from the government. And so what that does is farmers will say, well, I'm just going to grow as much food as I can to get the biggest subsidy I can. But then the price of those goods go down because, as we talked about, higher supply leads to lower price. The other big deal here is it hurts farmers and LDCs, right? Mexican corn should be cheaper than American corn, but it's not because the government pays subsidies or gives money to American farmers so they can charge less for their crops than the Mexican crops, right? It's a way the government keeps our farmers in business and encourages American consumers to buy American goods. Trump loves subsidies. All right. Here's a little minute video on subsidies. I think I showed this to you before. I'm just going to let it play. I think it'll work. It's not going to work. Let me try it this way. Oh, maybe it's going to work.
A subsidy is basically a sum of money that the state gives to people from a certain industry to keep the price of the product or service they're selling lower than it would have normally been. Let's assume it costs Bill $10 to produce a hat, whereas someone from China can do it for just $5. In this case, a $6 per hat subsidy from Uncle Sam can help Bill all of a sudden produce hats cheaper than...
Did you guys get that? The Chinese hat should be cheaper than the American hat, but with the subsidy, the American government makes the American hat cheaper
than the Chinese. In some cases, subsidies benefit society as a whole. For example, by encouraging people to develop new technologies such as solar or wind energy, or by encouraging NASA to explore the universe. In a lot of other cases, however, they do more harm than good. For example, producing cotton would normally not be all that profitable in the United States because the costs are higher than in less developed countries. The U.S. therefore heavily subsidizes this industry at the expense of people from some of the poorest parts of the world, in some cases, who are not able to compete. Brazil, for example, got upset and took this matter to the World Trade Organization. The result? Well, the U.S. is now subsidizing Brazilian cotton producers as well, instead of rethinking their entire cotton subsidy approach. But what should poorer countries, such as West African ones, do in this case? Countries which don't have Brazil's influence and negotiation power.
All right. So that was an actual case where Brazilian farmers sued the United States government because of the subsidies. Brazilian farmers won, so now the American government actually has to pay money to the Brazilian farmers. All right, let me keep going here. So last slide is we've got these systems that encourage the overproduction of food, whether it be subsidies or whether it just be the economic kind of calculus of farmers. And so oftentimes we have extra food. Here we see corn, soy blend, right? The two most popular crops in the United States. And what the government will often do is just donate it to foreign countries, all right? And that sounds good, and sometimes it's necessary, particularly when there's a potential famine. But at the same time, if you're just giving food away to foreign countries, that puts their own farmers out of business. They could have farmed food and made a living for themselves and their family, but instead the United States is flooding their markets with free food, thereby putting their farmers out of business. All right, I hope this made some sense. I know it's a little complicated. Reach out with questions. Your work is on Mr. Evans' history. I'll obviously put a link in Google Classroom. It was nice seeing you guys the other day on our Google Meetup. I'll do that in the future. I'm going to download Zoom, and maybe we'll do it that way from now on. And Petunia loved seeing you guys too. So be well, and I'll be in touch in the future. All right, take care.